Hey, what's going on, guys? Room Gaming here, back with another video. Today's episode, we're taking a look at some of the best solo carry champions on patch 2510. We're going to cover all the lanes, all the roles in this video. We do have a full article on our website up here. If you want to click the link in the description of this video, you can kind of help. You can just kind of go through and follow along. We're just going to go through this entire article here, kind of talk about some of the pros and the cons of each champ and some of the things that have changed within patch 2510. So first champion on our list is going to be Malphite, and Malphite has become pretty strong with some of the changes that came in 25.9, especially that feats of strength buff that came with the new armored advance through the plated steel caps. That's going to be this right here, if you're not sure what that is. And the reason that this is strong on him is because it makes him very gold efficient. So you're going to want to pick Malphite into any sort of AD heavy composition. So if you get like a Zed mid lane or like a Master Yi jungle, something like that, that's where you're going to want to lock in a Malphite. In terms of items, something like a Sunfire, those plated steel caps that we talked about earlier, and then also a Thornmail are pretty strong on him. And then you could also optionally go into something like a Frozen Heart. Something like an Abyssal Mass is also going to be really strong on him if you have a bunch of other AP champions on your team. You can also get quite a bit of healing through something like an Unending Despair, right? Because you're doing all that burst damage instantly. They'll probably turn around and do some damage to you as well after your ult lands, and you'll be able to heal a lot of that back based off the burst damage that you dealt in that 4-second period. In the top lane, we are going to be running Comet. That's going to help you kind of poke and survive lane. His laning phase isn't super good. And then we'll also be running Second Wind, Overgrowth, Attack Speed, and then Double Health Scaling. And you kind of see in this list here what they're good against, what they're good with. So they're going to be strong against something like an Irelia, Varus, Trundle, something auto-attack based. And then, of course, you're going to be a little bit weaker against any sort of AP, sort of magic damage champions like a Ryze, Gragas, Aurora. In terms of your best bans, top lane, you're not going to see Gragas top a whole bunch. So I'd probably opt into something like Sylas, right? Who could steal your ult, or something like a Cho'Gath or Nasus, who just going to naturally outscale you. I'd say probably the safest bet here, though, is going to be something like a Sylas. Next champion we're going to talk about is Shin. So Shin has gotten a lot of buffs to his Q. So that makes him quite a bit stronger than he's been, that we've seen him in previous patches. He does have a power spike item, and that's going to be Titanic Hydra. And this is really nice because this gives him the wave clear that he needs. Now with Shin, right, the whole idea is to position yourself around the map with your ultimate. So you're going to have to kind of keep your eyes on the minimap. If you are playing something like Shin, there is a pretty decent learning curve with understanding, like when to ult, when not to. We do recommend to take something like Teleport in case you do mess up an ult. You can always teleport back to your turret. But Shin is great right now because the biggest problem with top lane is you're kind of on an island by yourself, and Shin has the ability to impact the rest of the map. So he's also going to be running plated steel caps. He's going to be running Heart Steel as well. Your typical build is going to look something like this right here with Unending Despair and Deadman's. Obviously, you can swap out Deadman's for something like a Spirit Visage if needed. You could also go into something like a Jak'Sho, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of split pushing. Now, just kind of a tip here on the runes. A lot of people have been running Biscuit Delivery as well as Approach Velocity, so that might be a couple of runes that you can look into instead of what we just showed. We weren't running... this is just what an Emerald Plus that they're taking, is they're running Domination, but you can go the Inspiration Tree as well. There is a higher win rate there between Biscuit Delivery and Approach Velocity. And of course, the main rune that you're going to be running is Grasp with the Undying for those quick trades. In terms of who to ban, I'm surprised I don't see him on this list, but something like, like a Heimerdinger would be good, a Kennen would be good, even a Cho'Gath or a Mordekaiser is the one that came to mind for me. Any champion that doesn't rely on auto attacks is going to be good against Shin. Shin kind of fits a similar bucket to like Malphite. You're going to counter AD champions a little bit more with all your passive blocking. Up next on our list, we have Sett. So Sett has been like a staple top laner now for several patches in a row. And he actually got a little bit stronger this patch due to the Ignite buff that we got. It's going to make his level 6 all-in even more scary. I know we're saying run Teleport right here, but if you do feel that you're going to have a lot of kill pressure at level 6, I'd recommend to go Ignite over Teleport. He has a very, very dangerous all-in at level 6, and he is probably the best dueling champion on this list for top lane. Now with Sett, you are probably a little bit more of a dueler than a team fighter, so you're going to be running something like Hullbreaker, and then so that you can kind of run away, or if you need to engage, you can run something like Stridebreaker to kind of help you stick to the target, and it gives a lot of really good just base stats for Sett. Another end that's really good on Sett is going to be the Overlord's Bloodmail. This is really good because we're stacking so much health on set that we can kind of convert that into attack damage. And the more health that you're missing, the more damage that you'll do actually. And this is really strong with something like a Sterix Gauge because you can get that big shield. So you can kind of play the line a little bit more safely. If you are low health, you can get all the benefits from being low health and at the same time get the big Sterix Gauge shield. So these two items synergize really well together. You can also throw in something like a Spear of Shojin. That's going to give you that stacking ability and passive damage. So, all these items here really favor that sort of split push, extended trade sort of play style. So just kind of recap the top. Malphite's going to be like your tank, your initiator. Shin's going to work more of as like a tank support. And then Set's going to be more like a bruiser / a duelist. And then counters to Set are going to be anything that can really outduel him. So something like a Vayne or something that he can't stick to like a Vladimir or Gragas or Malphite. He can't really catch them, unfortunately. So they kind of soft counter him. And they don't really allow him to snowball and split quite as easily. You see, we also have Urgot on this list who can also outduel him. And you also got like Gragas, Malphite, Warwick, who are all really bad to split push against because you can't really get away from him. All right, and then with the recent nerfs to Xin Zhao, Jarvan does kind of rise back to power. And Jarvan kind of fits two bills, right? He's really good with his ganks, and he's also really good as like a long-range sort of engage. So he's actually a really good skirmisher as well. Early, that does, of course, fall off as the game goes on and you kind of turn more into like a peel / engage for your team. But something like a Jarvan, you're going to want to focus a little bit more around objectives than any sort of like split push. So your core items early are going to be like an Eclipse and Sundered Sky. They're both going to be really good dueling items, especially early game. And then as your dueling potential kind of falls off, you're going to go a little bit more tanky / support with like a Frozen Heart for that reduced attack speed. Spear of Visage for some MR, and then Thornmail for some armor. In terms of the best bans against Jarvan, so things that counter him is going to be anything that can't really escape from him. So you're probably going to ban like something like a Warwick or a Talon or Kindred, something that can kind of leap over his wall. And then anything that's not going to allow Jarvan to kind of snowball early. So something like an Ivern is really good at farming, kind of disengaging away from Jarvan. It's going to be really hard to stick to him. And he can just kind of reach you, run away, and just outscale you through his jungle clears. And, of course, all the support items that he builds. So he's probably going to be one of your best bans. Up next on our list, we have Nocturne. So the reason Nocturne's on our list is because of the early game nerf that's happened to junglers recently. Now, as junglers now have lost a lot of early pressure, that's going to allow something like Nocturne to kind of get his first core item or two and really dominate the sort of late, early to mid game. That's where Nocturne really shines. Especially at level 6, once he gets his ultimate, he's probably one of the best gankers in the game. So he's just really difficult to shut down at the moment. And one of the best things about Nocturne is if somebody does kind of overextend on a laner, you can just ult them and punish them immediately. And he's really good at stopping laners that are trying to snowball. So especially in something like a solo queue environment where there's a lot less coordination and things can kind of get out of control in your side lanes. Nocturne kind of lock things down a little bit better. Now, Nocturne's main counter is going to be anybody who can CC him and slow him down. So you really want something like a Stride Breaker for that additional movement speed. And then also something like a Hexplate. So if you're not sure what the Hexplate is after you cast your ultimate, you get 30% attack speed and 15% movement speed for 8 seconds. These two combined are going to give you that, stickiness to your target to be able to auto-attack them down, right? In terms of best bans, it's going to be very similar to Jarvan. If you're looking more at like the support level, something like a Lulu, something like a Braum, something that can disengage you after you ult, especially if you're trying to prioritize bot lane ganks, those two might be a good ban. If you're looking for like another jungler to ban, something like Master Yi, he'll just straight up outduel you. Something like an Ivern, of course, who's a great disengaged jungler. The next jungler on our list that you probably weren't expecting is Echo. So Echo is currently benefiting from the big AP item change, the rework, and a lot of his core items are a lot cheaper than they have been previously. So both Lichbane as well as Nashor's Tooth are both cheaper. And then not only that, Deathcap is 100 gold cheaper as well, so that's 500 gold shaved off his core build. And our runes are going to be running Dark Harvest into Inspiration. Now, champions that are going to counter Echo is going to be champions that have stronger early games, because Echo does take a little bit to get going, to get into some of those more scaling items. So anybody who has high pressure on the map early, or something just like Poppy, who's very tanky, right? is going to counter Echo. So it's not really that Echo like loses duels against some of these champions. It's just that they will have more impact on the map early. They're going to be taking objectives faster than you. So probably your best ban is going to be something like a Rengar, Kha'Zix, Evelynn. Probably, in my opinion, something like an assassin, as you will probably lose the gank battle right to the opposing jungler. So just to summarize those three there, Jarvan's going to be the early game control. Nocturne's going to be like a mid-game skirmisher, and then Echo's going to be more like the scaling assassin. Okay, going into the mid lane now, the best mid laner, in my opinion, for solo queue at the moment is going to be Annie. Annie has jumped up 5% in the win rate from last patch, going from 47 to 52% win rate. A lot of this is due to the buffs to Ignite, her level 6 all-in, and then, of course, also the AP item rework. And one thing that's kind of unique about her is she did avoid the Liandry's nerfs, unlike a lot of the other mages. So overall, I think she's a really solid pick right now. You can just kind of see by the win rate up here how good she's doing. She's also one of the easiest champions of the game to pilot as well. So, you know, that is worth probably like 1 to 2% win rate as well, just because the champion's easy to play, at least, of course, until you do get to higher levels of gameplay. Her two core items are going to be Malignance as well as the Storm Surge, which is going to apply the Squall debuff to them. So it's going to give you a little bit more burst damage, and then through Malignance, this as well is going to give you a little bit more burst as well as ultimate haste, which is very, very important to us. In terms of who to ban mid lane, obviously anything that can counter your burst. So something like a Kayle, she's got her ultimate. She can pretty much completely negate your ult. Malzahar, it depends on who gets the ult off first. He has good potential to really outduel you. He, of course, also has the spell shield, so you have to play around that, which is very annoying. Echo can just ultimate out of your ult, right? When you get him low on health, he just presses R and he's almost full health again. And then, of course, the Anivia Egg passive. So in my opinion, probably the best bans would be something like an Echo. You're going to see higher play rate through something like that, or a Malzahar. Up next on our list is going to be Diana. She's another mid laner who avoids the Liandry nerfs. You can build Liandry's on her. One of the good things about Diana is she has multiple build paths. So she can be pretty good against tanks. She can also be, well, not really tanks, but sort of bruisers. And she can also be bursty as well. So she can be a threat, like as an assassin. She can also split push pretty well. I think she's probably the most versatile champion on this list. One of the good things about Diana is she's actually pretty good early game. She can kind of hold her own, unlike a lot of other assassins early game. She doesn't just straight up lose the 1 through 6. She also does benefit, of course, you know, from the buff Lichbane, from the buff Nashor's Tooth, the buff Death Cap. So she's just really good, and she can pivot between play styles, and she can choose a build that fits the enemy comp, to your team's needs. So some of the best bans against Diana is going to be anything that's really good against high health pools. So something like a Swain who can kind of drain you down, something like a Cass who'll just ult you and she'll just eat through your health pool. Or, you know, any other champion who can just simply outburst you, something like a Qiyana. You're probably just going to lose the assassin battle against her. So, you know, just looking at play rate here, probably something like a Qiyana is going to be one of the better bans. Up next on our list, we have Katarina. Now, Katarina is also going to be benefiting from these new AP changes. But one of the main things about Kat specifically is her early game. So there is no longer the large rod that builds into the Lichbane. So it is now instead a blasting wand, and this is very important because that helps her scale earlier. If you guys know anything about Katarina, you know that she is probably one of the hardest snowball champions in the game. So any advantage that you can get early is going to help you, just win more games, right? So Lichbane is cheaper. It's got a better build path as well. Another thing that's great about Katarina is she's probably the best roamer on this list, especially after level 6. Because your enemy laner is probably going to be scared to step up against you. That's going to allow you to shove the wave and then roam. So it's very important that you keep that pressure on your mid lane before you do roam. You know, one of the nice things about Katarina is even if you are behind on CS, just one kill in the side lane can completely make up for that. And not only that, it can also change the lane in your teammates' favor as well. So you can have more impact, you know, just outside of your own lane. So when you do complete that first core item, Lichbane, make sure you're looking to roam. In terms of Katarina's counters, I would say something like a Galio is going to be your main counter, just due to the amount of CC that he has. He's going to keep you from being able to pick up your daggers to get that reset. You can see there's 840 games of Galio being picked against Katarina here at Emerald Plus. So most of the community thinks that Galio is a strong counter against Cat. So I'd recommend that be your ban. Okay, then just a quick recap. Andy's going to be that level 6 burst, the all-in champion, sort of battle mage. Diana is going to be sort of the flexible, especially like if you're first pick, Diana might be good to lock in if you're not sure what the enemy's going to pick. And you can kind of change your build or playstyle based on what other people pick. And then if you're really wanting to roam, if you're really wanting to snowball, something like Katarina is going to fit the bill. Okay, up next on the list, we have Jinx. So Jinx has been good for several patches in a row now. She's going to be really good, especially in the mid game and some of those team fights, especially with those rockets that go out, do a whole bunch of splash AoE damage. And she's going to have a really big 2-item power spike. So after you finish your wild arrows along with your IE, that's when you're going to see Jinx kind of come online. And you're wanting to see that somewhere around the 20-minute mark. She's also going to be really good with something like a Braum. Braum can proc his passive. Once you get that stun off, it's going to pretty much guarantee your traps. And it's pretty much a free kill. Even if you don't get the target killed by then, you get your rocket that you can follow up with to finish the job. And she's also really good with enchanters, so something like a Yuumi, a Nami, Soraka, Janna, Sona, something like that. Anything that is going to just keep her alive, essentially, and allow her to extend the amount of autos that she can get out in a team fight. So like we said, we're going to be going Wild Arrows, Berserker Greaves, Infinity Edge, Runan's Hurricane, which is really good for team fights to get those additional rockets out. Lord Dominic's to kind of help us against some tanks, and then Bloodthirster. Bloodthirster is pretty situational, but I do think that is probably the best item. You could replace it with something like a PD or a Mercurial Scimitar if you are against like a Malzahar or something. And then, of course, she is going that lethal tempo for that additional attack speed with sorcery. But this is absolutely, in my opinion, going to be the best team fighting sort of scaling ADC on this list. If we take a look at some of her counters, she does get countered by Tristana and Twitch. So really anybody who can jump on top of her and assassinate her. So Corki with the package, Tristana can leap, and then Twitch can sneak up with his Q. Anything that can just burst her down very quickly and not allow her to get those autos out. So I highly recommend to ban one of these. I like to ban Twitch personally. He's very annoying, but Tristana is actually really strong right now. You see the amount of games that they have under, just looking at the play rate. And actually that does lead me into our next ADC, and that is going to be Tristana. Now, Tristana is really strong right now, in my opinion, for 2 reasons. It's her synergy with Wild Arrows along with the Flicker Blade. So Flicker Blade is going to give her more CDR on her basic abilities. If you know anything about Tristana, she's very dependent on her attack speed steroid from her Q and funneling that into her E, her bombs. So the additional CDR that we get from that, and then through Wild Arrows, that additional attack speed that we can get to stack that bomb faster. And then you also get the critical strike from Wild Arrows that synergizes great into an IE. So Tristana is going to be really strong at level 6. That's kind of her all-in phase. You just want to be careful, and you want to know when to all in. You don't just want to jump in at every single moment you get. Over aggression is definitely a thing on Tristana. So you do kind of need to know when to hold back. And she's really good if you are duoed up with a support, so you guys can kind of coordinate that all in together. And some of the best bans for Tristana, if we look at the ADCs here, there's not a ton of ADCs that really counter that much. We do have something like a Nyla or Lucian or Ashe. Ashe is probably the scariest ADC on this list because you can jump in and she can just ult you. But I really don't think she's that hard of a counter, to be honest. Really, I'd probably look more into banning a support over an ADC. If I was playing Tristana, something like a Karma might be good. She has a lot of disengage, a lot of shields. She's got her stun, so the shields can counter your burst, and then she can just kind of peel away with the stun and just pretty much negate your entire all-in combo. Next ADC on our list is going to be Lucian, and Lucian is going to be really strong due to his burst that he brings, especially to the laning phase. When you pair up your Essence Reaver along with an IE, you will do a massive amount of damage. And then that additional ability haste through the Essence Reaver will just allow you to kind of go through your burst a little bit quicker. And a lot of that burst does come from press the attack, which you can get 3 stacks of PTA. And you can stack that pretty quickly with his Light Slinger, his passive. Right whenever you use an ability, you basically shoot 2 shots, as this does apply on hit effects. So you want to play Lucian into like a skirmish heavy sort of composition. Now he will have a similar playstyle to like the Tristana that we just talked about. He is also going to have Flicker Blade. He does heavily rely on his abilities and not just his auto attacks. And one of the things about Lucian, though, is he does not scale quite as good as something like a Tristana, but he does bring more burst that is less risky because you don't have to like leap in as much. You don't have to, when Tristana goes in, it's like an all-in attempt. Lucian can kind of dash in and he can kind of peel out with his ult. He's not necessarily having to go as deep as something like a Tristana. So very strong. You can see he's got almost a 20% pick rate in Emerald Plus right now. So one of the top ADCs at the moment. If we look at some of the best bans for Lucian, Nyla's pretty... She can counter you mainly due to the ghost effect that she has. She can dodge a lot of those auto attacks and kind of negate your burst. But very similar story to Tristana here. There's not many ADCs that counter you. So what you're going to be looking to do is kind of lock down that early game, make some plays early, and try to help your team snowball, especially around those early dragon objectives. So just to kind of summarize our list here, we had Jinx, who's going to be the hyper carry, probably the best team fighter. Tristana, who's going to be like an all-in sort of threat. She's going to be really good at scaling, plays a little bit more like an assassin. And then Lucian here, who's going to be like the self-sufficient sort of playmaker. Okay, number 1 on our list is going to be Braum for the support. Braum has been pretty strong for the past few patches, especially now that we're introducing the tier 3 boots, as long as some of the changes that were made to unflinching. We have seen a pretty high win rate on him. You see he's almost 53%. I guess he's closer to 52.5%, but he's up there. A pretty high pick rate as well at 8%. And Braum is going to be really good with ADCs that can attack very quickly in like a short succession. So something like a Jinx, who has her fully stacked minigun, something like a Lucian with his passive, or like a Tristana that we just talked about with her Q attack speed steroid. Any ADC that can stack his passive quickly is going to be very strong with him. Another reason he's very strong right now is due to all the skirmishes that are taking place, especially in the early game. He's very good in 2v2, but he's even better in 3v3 when both junglers come down, especially around objectives like Dragon. That passive and just all the damage that he can soak just makes him, a really, really good support. And he just synergizes really well with some of the stronger ADCs. So due to the fact that Lucian, Jinx, Tristana are all strong, we talked about all 3 of them in our ADC list, it just naturally brings up the value of Braum. Now, there are certain ADCs that Braum is not very strong with, something like an Ezreal, something like a Jhin, less auto attacks, less passive procs. You kind of get the gist. Now, his core item is going to be the Solstice Slay. He has so much CC built into his kit, you're going to be proccing this a lot, getting a lot of passive healing from it. And then also our Locket, just going to help keep your ADC alive. And then just an additional peeling item here, Knight's Vow. Your role is to soak as much damage as you possibly can. In terms of champions that counter Braum, really anything with sustain is going to counter him. And the idea of Braum is to all in with your ADC and get the kill in short succession, a lot of burst. Soraka or Seraphine, they both have CC that can lock you down. The healing that they grant as well are going to be very annoying. It's just going to be a little bit harder to lock in that kill. They're very passive in lane, and a lot of times they will just end up outscaling you in the late game. And then same thing with Zilean. His ultimate just makes it very annoying to all in somebody and get that cheesy early kill. So probably one of those 3 should be your ban. Up next we have Leona. You can see she's sitting at a 51.1% win rate. Leona did recently get some buffs as well, and she's going to be really strong for the exact same reasons that Braum is strong. She just does very good with something like a Jinx, with a Tristana, with a Lucian, and she's just great at snowballing those ADCs. Now, Lucian is very strong at level 2. She has a very good level 2 all-in. And she's also really good at roaming due to her ultimate, right? She can just throw her ultimate out in the mid lane and catch somebody out. Even if you don't land it for the stun, you can get the slow, which can be enough to secure a kill. Now, for Leona, a lot of people are taking Celestial Opposition, which is good if you are trying to peel for your ADC, which makes sense. But it's not the best for securing kills. So a lot of people right now are taking Bloodsong. So if we look at the passive effect from Bloodsong, it's almost like a built-in press the attack. So unique Spellblade, after using an ability, your next basic attack within 10 seconds deals 100% base AD bonus. On hit, if the target is a champion, inflict them with Expose Weakness. For 4 seconds, causes them to take 8% melee or 5% ranged increased damage from all sources, 1.5 second cooldown. So if you are wanting to play a little bit more aggressive and actually secure those kills, especially if you're playing something like a Lucian, right? I would recommend to go something like Bloodsong. And then she's going to have pretty much the same build as Braum, right? She's going to have Plated Steel Caps, Locket. We're going to go Knight's Vow, Thornmail, and then the Ward Stone. Now, one thing that's very interesting about Leona is Braum is her biggest weakness. So, just be careful locking in her in first, because Braum is very popular right now, and you're probably going to get counterpicked if you do, like first pick a Leona. Again, just looking at the games played, Braum and Janna are probably going to be your main two bans. They have too much disengage for you. Even if you land your Q ult combo, they're just going to disengage you with their ults. So I'd recommend picking Leona after the enemy support has already picked their champion and you know that you can freely engage. Then we're going to be running the Resolve Tree, Aftershock, Secondary Tree, Inspiration. Next support I want to talk about is going to be Sona, sitting at a pretty high win rate as well, 51.4%. So Sona did get a buff to her Q recently. Lulu has gotten nerfed recently. So Sona is actually probably the best enchanter support right now. Now, one thing that we have seen in the data, though, is that people who are maxing Q first are getting a little bit higher win rate than somebody who maxes W first. So if we click highest win rate here, you can see people who are maxing Q first actually have a higher win rate. We can also see that the core items change a little bit as well. So we will briefly cover that. So this is the Bloodsong that we are talking about earlier. Going to allow your ADC to scale a little bit harder, going to give that sort of passive PTA effect. But most people right now are building the Dreammaker, which of course is going to give a little bit more sustain. So it just depends how you want to play the lane. If you think you got kill pressure, go ahead and go with the Bloodsong. If not, and you want to play a little bit more passive, then a lot of people are building Dreammaker. But with Sona, I will say you probably do want to play a little bit more defensively than aggressively, because the whole idea behind Sona is to sort of scale into the late game with all of her aura effects between her healing, between her E, and then of course her game-changing ultimate, Crescendo. The whole idea here is to get out of lane, to keep yourself healed up, keep your ally healed up, and sort of scale into that late game. Probably going to be better with an ADC that scales, mid to late game. She's not going to do as good as something like a Lucian, right? Because he really requires those early kills to get the ball rolling. Now, in terms of bans, she's going to be pretty weak against something like a Blitzcrank, something like a Rakan, Tahm Kench, really anything that can kind of cheese you early game. So she does struggle against that hard CC. I do want to say that Blitz isn't a huge counter, right? Just don't get hooked. Easier said than done. But something like a Nautilus to me would be a little bit more scary, because he could just point and click ult you, right? Follow up with his Q. ADC follows up with, let's just say Jinx traps, or you're just dead, right? If you get caught overextending. Same thing with Tahm Kench. He's going to punish you if you overextend too long. Same thing with Rakan with all the move speed. Same thing with Pantheon with his ult. So long story short, you are very easy to kill, especially in the early game. You're not going to really come online till a little bit later. So just to kind of summarize these supports, right? So we have Braum, who's going to be like the skirmish sort of tank. Going to give a lot of peel for your ADC. We also have Leona, who's going to be more of a playmaker, hard engage. And then Sona, who's going to be more of the enchanter with scaling utility. All right, guys, that's going to be the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. See you in the next one.